Yo, what's up, everyone? This is Terry with College Football Stop. Bring you another show today. Obviously, kind of some exciting things going on around Ohio State right now. Big recruiting class this past Wednesday for the early signing day. A lot of the guys signed. A lot of them are supposed to be coming to campus early to kind of get a head start on their college football career. So that's awesome. Definitely want to get into some of that stuff. And then I do also want to talk about just a couple things with Michigan. So I was kind of looking at kind of how Jim Harbaugh and Michigan have been able to sustain the success that they've been able to sustain without like nationally elite recruiting classes. So I want to get into some of that. That's where I'm going to start because I want to talk about some of that stuff and get it out of the way, and then get into this recruiting class. So let's go ahead and do that. First thing, in terms of Michigan, Michigan actually just received a notice of allegations regarding like the COVID restrictions, all the stuff people were talking about with like hamburgers and all that shit. Obviously, there's more to that. A lot of Michigan fans say that they don't think that there's a ton to it, but I mean, Michigan was handed 4 level 2 and 1 level 1 NCAA recruiting violations or whatever. I mean, I don't know exactly what those things mean. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I think that the level 1 is obviously the one that's more serious and could end up having like some kind of suspension or something like that paired with it. Now I know the NCAA was originally trying to do like I think a 4 game suspension, and then Jim Harbaugh and Michigan decided to do a 3 game suspension, something like that, in the beginning of the year. So I mean, I don't think that this is anything crazy. I don't think anything is going to come of this other than, like I said, maybe a game or two suspension, something ridiculous like that. But I don't know. I just wanted to talk about it because it did happen. They got that notice, which means they now have, I think, 180 days to respond to the NCAA before they can go further with actions and whatnot. So I don't know. That's something to keep your eye out for. And I mean, if they're getting 4 level 2s and 1 level 1 for um, like those recruiting issues that happened during COVID, I would expect that they will probably get more than that for the cheating allegations that have been happening. So I don't know. We'll keep an eye on that. That'll be more of like an off-season thing, anyways, because the NCAA is taking their time as they always do with investigating that situation. So, all right. Anyway, what I was talking about before is that I wanted to see why Michigan was so successful. I mean, mainly against Ohio State, but also against the rest of the Big Ten. Right? If you look at before COVID, there was definitely some years in there where Michigan was losing 2 or 3 games, losing to other teams in the Big Ten that they probably shouldn't have, and then they've really never been great in terms of like national games, like bowl games, and obviously the playoff games that they've been in. What I noticed with Michigan is that they have 7 guys, so only 7 players of their starting 22 players are juniors and below. So basically, what that means is that 15, basically 2/3 of their starting team on offense and defense is a senior, so a fourth year guy or higher. And they actually have quite a few of them that are higher than seniors that are like graduates or like redshirt seniors. And just to kind of look at compare that to Ohio State. Obviously, Ohio State's turning over more talent constantly, but also recruiting better. So you would expect for that to happen, right? You would expect there to be turnover and kind of the next guy up mentality. Ohio State has 7 underclassmen, and I'm referring to an underclassman as a junior or lower. 7 underclassmen just on their offense. That's how many Michigan has on their entire team. And then on Ohio State's defense, they had 8 underclassmen as starters, which is more than Michigan's entire football team. So I personally think that's kind of the recipe for success right now for Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, especially against Ohio State, because Ohio State was impacted by COVID in the sense of they missed out on kind of like a year of development with not being able to practice as much and all that good stuff. And then Ohio State continued to have the turnover on their roster like they normally do, and kind of development fell behind a little bit. So I don't know, man. It was something I was curious about. It seems like Jim Harbaugh's found the code to winning the Big Ten at least, and he hasn't really done anything on a national scale yet, and I don't expect that to change this year because I think Alabama's going to handle them, but that seems to be the recipe for success. And the way that Jim Harbaugh has been able to sustain that, it's not by having guys be on the team. I mean, some of it is. I shouldn't say it's not. A lot of it is not by having guys on the team all the way until they're seniors and then putting them out on the field. A lot of it has to do with the transfer portal, which I don't know. I don't know how to look at this. Like, is this a recipe for sustained success or is it not? We'll find out in the next few years as long as Jim Harbaugh stays at Michigan. But I mean, they've been bringing in guys who are going to be seniors or going to be graduate transfers to play in on the trenches. Basically, they're bringing in those guys for the defensive line. They're bringing in those guys for the offensive line. So everyone talks about how great Michigan's trenches are. It makes sense, especially when it's literally like men against boys. I mean, you're talking about someone who's 22, 23 compared to, maybe a 19-year-old or whatever. Having those extra years of your body developing is huge. So, I mean, maybe all of this that I'm saying, I want to get kind of swing this back to Ohio State because one of the big topics that's going around right now, everybody seems to be talking about how many guys Ohio State should have come back next year. And I think that it's going to be a lot. I think that Ohio State is going to have a ton of those guys from that 2021 class returning, which means that going into next year, Ohio State will be a very senior-led team. And I know that, some Ohio State fans are looking at it as like, oh, well, these guys were not phenomenal players. I don't know if I want them to come back. And I don't necessarily think that way. I look at it as like once you start getting into being a senior and past being a senior, you're a grown man at that point. The way that you handle business changes. You no longer have to be taught certain things because you've had all of the years to develop those things, and now you can be taught the next step. And Larry Johnson, listen, I know I'm talking about just one position, but as much as people hate on Larry Johnson for his recruiting and all of that stuff, I think that he knows how to teach that next step. Like you look at a guy like Chase Young, he was coming back to train with Larry Johnson once he was already in the NFL for over a year. I think that Larry Johnson does have the ability to teach that next step, to teach you how to be an NFL defensive lineman. And I mean, if these guys stay for one more year, I think that you're going to see that step. You look at a guy like Jack Sawyer; his body's going to be more mature. He's going to be, another year older, another year experience because he missed one entire year of development by playing that jack position because that was obviously a lot different than the standard defensive end position. So I don't know. I'm excited about it. I think that Ohio State's going to see a ton of guys return. Honestly, I could see out of the 2021 class, I could see maybe only like 2 to 3 guys leaving. Now, if that is the case, that would be huge for Ohio State. There's also the chance that some of those guys are going to be like, look, it's my time. I'm going to go ahead and head out of here. But I know that obviously Marv's probably leaving. And then you look at, guys like Donovan Jackson potentially might go. Denzel Burke's another one who I could see leaving. So again, some of those guys are going to be leaving. JT Tuimoloau is one who I've been trying to keep my eye on and kind of pick up any word because I think JTT is probably ready to go to the NFL. It just depends on where his draft grade is, where he thinks he will fall at. And I don't know, man. If those guys come back, I think that this Ohio State team is going to be hard to beat next year, especially if they have a good quarterback. So I think Devin Brown is going to be that good quarterback. I think that he's going to lead this team into this bowl game and going into next year. But we'll see, man. Like I said, if some things fall the right way for Ohio State, this team in 2024 is going to be really good. And it's kind of do or die time for Ryan Day, right? I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. Right now, it's his time where he needs to get this ship going in the right direction, or he needs to go on and move on to the NFL. So, all right, moving on from that though. Again, that was just some Michigan stuff. I do want to talk about this Ohio State recruiting class. If you are someone who follows recruiting, and you're like kind of into it, and you're watching as the day goes on, kind of what's happening. I would imagine that Wednesday, on National Signing Day Wednesday, you probably had a day where you were up and down emotionally and kind of all over the place. I know I was because I was trying to follow it just because I want to be able to talk about this stuff with you guys. But there was early in the day, there was a word that came out that basically Jeremiah Smith is wavering, whether that's Florida State, whether that's Miami. That word was out there all day. And then Edric Houston, I mean, there was parts of the day with Edric Houston where I think that most Ohio State fans were probably like, he's gone. It's a wrap. He's going to Alabama. Clemson was in there for a minute, apparently, but really it was Alabama that was the big threat. And when you're recruiting against Nick Saban, that's just, I mean, recruiting against Nick Saban is like, you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Alabama is that school. They are that one that is always going to be hard to recruit against. So I don't know. I do want to talk about some of these like positions and position grades. Just starting with quarterback. Obviously, Ohio State got Aaron Noland, 5-star quarterback, lefty out of Georgia. So he's playing in super good competition down there. He kind of had a down year this year compared to his last year. But his team did lose a lot of weapons. He doesn't have other guys on his offense right now that are going to D1 schools or going to like Power 5 schools. Whereas if you look at last year, he definitely did. Especially Ohio State tight end Jelani Thurman. He played with Air Noland the year before, I guess in 2022. And that was when Air had some crazy stats, won the state championship, all that good stuff. But we've seen him go out and compete with all the other quarterbacks at the Elite 11 also, and he was right there hanging with them. I mean, I think this is a great get. I have this as an A. He wasn't Ohio State's first option, but I think that he is just as good as Ohio State's first option. And kudos to Ryan Day and Corey Dennis for being able to swing back and get Aaron Noland after the whole Dylan Raiola issue happened. And then, obviously they tried to talk to Jaden Davis that went to Michigan. That didn't happen, so they were able to pull Aaron Noland. Like I said, A for that get. I think that he has a bright future at Ohio State. And, I mean, it's just one of those kids where when you look at him, he just exudes confidence and he exudes excellence. So can't wait to see what he does at Ohio State here in the coming years. Moving on to the running back position. So I have this position graded out as a B. Ohio State brought in James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon. James Peoples, composite, like a top 100 guy, which is awesome. I mean, bringing in a top 100 recruit out of Texas at running back, I mean, sign me up for that. I'm good with it. So, and then obviously they got Sam Williams-Dixon, who out of Pickerington North and here in Columbus. And, he's kind of just a 3-star guy, but freak athlete. I mean, I expect big things out of Sam Williams-Dixon. I expect him to actually make the playing field here at Ohio State. And honestly, with this position, I think that it's important that both of these guys come in and do everything they can to get ready to play, because that running back room, as of right now, heading into next year, is thin. I think that Travion Henderson probably comes back, but I'm going off of just like he hasn't announced yet, and maybe it makes sense for him to come back because he hasn't put that full season out there. But he could easily decide to go head off to the NFL, and that would leave this running back room with Dallin Hayden, James Peoples, and Sam Williams-Dixon. And that would be crazy. At that point, I think Ohio State would be looking to bring in someone from the portal. But if Travion Henderson decides to stay, I could see it kind of being 1-2 punch with Trey and Dallin. And then if either one of these guys can get ready, you're the third running back. And I could see that being James Peoples. I could see him coming in and being ready to go right away. So we'll see how that works out. I mean, overall, solid get for Tony Alford. Obviously, they lost Jordan Lyle, who I think is going to be a big time player too. So that does suck. But I don't know. When you're recruiting kids from South Florida, you never know what's going to happen. And I mean, let's go ahead and get into, while we're talking about South Florida, let's get into this wide receiver get for Ohio State. Brian Hartline, coming into National Signing Day, he had commitments from Jeremiah Smith, number 1 overall player in the country, obviously a must get. Mylan Graham, number 7 wide receiver in the country, also 5-star commit out of Indiana. the number one player in Indiana, obviously with him being that highly rated. But I really like Mylan Graham. When you watch his film, he is quick, he's twitched up, and I think that he's super polished as a route runner, which I think that will help him uh, be able to get on the field early at Ohio State. So I don't know, man. If you look at this wide receiver I'm looking at Jeremiah Smith as like the most sure thing in this entire class that he's going to come into college football and be ready to go. And then Hartline's going to, shape him up to be hopefully one of the best wide receivers in college football, at least by 2025. But I think he'll see the field in 24. Mylan Graham could too, man. These guys are just that good. And then the other receiver that Ohio State had committed was Jeremiah McClellan, who is, I think he's a kid out of St. Louis. He was like a 4-star guy, but another just, I mean, really good player. Like I have nothing bad to say about Jeremiah McClellan. I think he's going to be a superstar, and he ended up flipping his commitment and ended up signing with Oregon. It was kind of writing was on the walls. We were hoping that Brian Hartline could hang on to him, but if he didn't, we understood that that's kind of just where it was because he was coming into this class as the third wide receiver in the class. And then looking at the wide receiver room at Ohio State, you have guys like Carnell Tate, you have Brandon Ennis, you have Noah Rogers, Bryson Rogers. Some of the guys from the 22 class are still left on the team. And then I think that Emeka Egbuka is probably leaning towards coming back right now. I think that Emeka knows he's a first round, kind of like top 15 pick type player. And he also knows that injuries and the situation at Ohio State last year did not allow him to play up to that standard, which is probably going to cost him some draft stock. And I think that he could do good by himself or for himself to come back to Ohio State. And I think that would also drastically increase the ceiling of this Ohio State wide receiver unit for the 2024 team, because having that veteran presence, having that guy out there who you can rely on. I know that we have tons of talent in this wide receiver unit, especially with the two guys coming in. But you can't look at it as just talent. These guys don't have any experience at the college level. Also, I hate to say it, but injuries happen. You need depth. You need guys who you can count on. You need a veteran presence. And Ohio State, if Emeka left, they wouldn't have that veteran presence right now. So hopefully he'll stay. They'll still have like Jaden Ballard and whatnot, but I mean, what kind of veteran presence is Jaden Ballard going to provide in terms of like playing on the field? I mean, he hasn't played since he's been here. Maybe he will. That's another guy that's in that unit that if you're a wide receiver coming in, you got to look at like, okay, well, that's just another body in there who is probably not going anywhere, because I think Jaden Ballard wants to play at Ohio State. Shout out to Chris Drew on Minnesota Sports. He said that Jaden Ballard had a previous relationship with Brian Hartline even from before he was a recruit for Ohio State. So, that obviously being from Ohio, people know people. So I don't know, man. I think that unit is deep. I hope Emeka comes back, and just A+ get for Brian Hartline for getting these two guys, Jeremiah Smith and Mylan Graham. Moving on I want to talk about this O-line class a little bit. So this is one that's been a topic of controversy. I think a lot of people are not happy with the class. Me personally, I like the class a lot. I think that they have one guy in this class who I think is extremely underrated, who's going to end up being like that starting left tackle type player. And that is, see here, one of the Armstrong twins. I think it. I forget which one. Anyway, I think it's Devontae Armstrong. Let me see here. Let me look. Anyway, so with the Armstrong twins that Ohio State is getting out of St. Edwards, those two kids are both 3-stars, but I think that both of them have the potential to end up being stars at Ohio State. Especially especially Deontay. That's the one I'm talking about. Especially Deontay. I think that it's a guy who's 6'6", and I think that he has potential to be like that star left tackle at Ohio State, especially if he gets here and gets his body in the right shape. Because right now, from looking at him, he's a little too small. He's gonna have to get a little bit bigger. But the muscle was there. I think he's just going to need to put on a little bit of weight, which I think Coach Mick is perfect for doing that because he seems to just put weight on everybody, including the wide receivers. If you look at Emeka, he's out there looking like a linebacker. But anyway, the other guy that I'm super excited about is Ian Moore, another guy who's 6'5", 295. This kid I think has potential to be a superstar on the offensive line. And then Ohio State has two other guys, Gabe Van Sickle, who was a late add, was a Northwestern commit, but another guy who's 6'5", 283. That's a developmental piece. It's that position overall along the offensive line is developmental, regardless, unless you're getting like the 5-star all everything tackle, which that's kind of the knock on Ohio State is that they didn't get that. They didn't get the 5-star left tackle start right away, or not right away, but almost for sure NFL draft pick in the future type guy. And I mean, honestly, I just don't think that Ohio State's ever going to get that every single year on the offensive line. To me, that's something you need to get once every 2 to 3 years. And I know that they haven't done that in quite a while, but I think you need to get that once every 2 to 3 years, and then you need to develop the hell out of the rest of your guys. Get them ready. That's a position that you should be able to develop. You should be able to physically develop. And if you're looking at Ohio State's offensive line, they haven't been bad. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I think that Ohio State has not had a dip or gotten worse at the offensive line. I don't even think that from last year. A lot of people thought that. I think that a lot of the issues with the offensive line last year was one, they were pretty good in pass pro, but when they were not, it was an automatic sack because Kyle McCord was not making anything happen in the backfield. He was not even moving into the right places in the backfield. When you look at the offensive line creating a perfect pocket and Kyle doesn't step up at all and it turns into a sack, you can't do anything else. Like, as an offensive lineman, if your quarterback doesn't do the right thing, you're in a losing battle because you have a defender who can see where your quarterback is racing you to that point, but they know where the point is, and you're doing what you're trying to do, which is keep that guy outside so your quarterback can step up. And if your quarterback backs up, you're pushing the defender right into your quarterback, so there's nothing you can do. Again, I don't know. I like the offensive line class. Like I said, it's not one of the best in the country. It's not anything like that, which at Ohio State it kind of needs to be. So they do need to get better, but I like the class overall. I think I'm going to grade it out as like a C because you didn't get those, those highly recruited guys, those guys who are highly rated. But at the same time, it's not terrible, and I think that if they develop this class, it'll be a really good one. All right, moving on from that, I want to talk about the tight end position now. Ohio State got two of them in this class, Max LeBlanc and Damarian Witten. I really like Damarian Witten. I think that he is a guy, he's a 3-star guy out of Cleveland, Glenville, excuse me. But I think that he's a dog, and I think that Ryan Day was even talking about, when he was discussing the class, he was talking about how Damarian Witten could be like a wide receiver type guy, basically like a tight end split out that you're using as a big body, but who's also a really good athlete. Something that maybe like G. Scott you would think would do. I think I would expect that from excuse me. I would expect that from a guy like G. Scott, but I just think that Ryan Day knows that this kid has that superstar potential, and he's going to take some time if he's going to get to the actual size that Ohio State wants their tight ends to be. But I do think that in the meantime, I think they can use him in some of those receiving, kind of splitting him out positions. And then Max LeBlanc is just that stereotypical tight end. Like I said, I like what, with Max LeBlanc, he's kind of a developmental guy. You bring him in here, he's the number 21 tight end in the country. So, you're not expecting anything crazy. Guy's 6'3", 220. And I expect Ohio State to do good things with him. Coach Key is one of those guys who I think is an up-and-coming superstar coach. And if you don't know, it's Coach Keen. It's Keenan Bailey. Everybody calls him Coach Key. But anyway, he's one of those guys who I think is just going to turn out a really good room. And you look at that room going into next year with G. Scott, Jelani Thurman, some of the other guys they still have there, and then Max LeBlanc, Damarian Witten. I think it's going to be a good room. And I think those guys are going to be more involved in the game plan going forward because Coach Key is going to have big body receivers out there as opposed to just blockers like we're used to having. I gave that position a C. I mean, they didn't get the highly rated guys, obviously, and I think that Coach Key will get that going forward. He's already kind of in on some of the 25 and 26 guys who he wants, so expect good things from that unit. Moving on, so the other position of controversy all weekend was the defensive line. Everybody's talking about how Larry Johnson should be fired, blah 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 blah. And I mean, honestly, I don't necessarily disagree with that. Let's see here, I'm not saying that he's someone who's doing everything that needs to be done. Um, Obviously, Larry Johnson's getting up there in age, and he hasn't been recruiting as well as he should be. But at the same time, I think the defensive line was really good this year, so I have a trouble saying that he has to go. But I do think that Ohio State needs to figure something out with defensive line recruiting. Right now, they're just kind of not getting the bodies. So, the defensive line recruiting class ended up being, let's see here, Eric Mensah, 3-star defensive lineman, and I mean, honestly, hopefully this is a guy who's kind of a diamond in the rough that Larry Johnson found. And Edric Houston, 5-star all everything defensive end. This is the one who was supposedly going to Alabama. That was kind of what was in question. Ended up not going there. He ended up sticking with Ohio State. Ryan Day was live doing his press conference when this happened, and he, excuse me, I had someone knocking on my door, kind of threw me off. Anyway, Ryan Day was live, and he stopped. He walked away to take a phone call, and he came back and was super excited. A few minutes later, Edric Houston signed with Ohio State. I think this is a guy who you want to keep, watch out for him. He's going to be playing this year. I think that, you look at guys like JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, those guys came in and played their freshman year. I think Edric Houston is going to be that type of guy, and hopefully Larry Johnson can develop him into the superstar that he wants to be. So let's move on from that here. Let me see. Moving on to the linebacker position. So this is one that is, oh man, I don't know what to say about this. The linebackers that Ohio State got is Peyton Pierce out of Texas, who I think is kind of looking like the Tommy Eichenberg mold. And then they got Garrett Stover, Cade Stover's cousin, who plays safety in high school, but we're expecting him to play linebacker in college because that position will fit him better. I mean, I don't hate the haul. It's not terrible. I want to see them get some more freak athlete type guys at linebacker. You look at the teams in the South that are in the playoffs every year, the teams that are making runs every single year. Those guys are bringing in freak athlete, highly rated linebackers every single year. I don't think that Jim Knowles has that in him in terms of a recruiter. Maybe James Laurinaitis does. We don't know that yet. But there is smoke that, a lot of the recruits kind of enjoy what they're hearing from him. So maybe James Laurinaitis will eventually be Ohio State's linebacker coach, and we can see that recruiting pick up a little bit. I did grade that position out as a C also. Like I said, not really highly rated guys. I mean, Garrett Stover's like a fringe top 100 player. But, I mean, I don't know. That's not the guys who are like, he's also a safety, and we're going to convert him to a linebacker from what my understanding is. So moving on from that, I want to talk about the cornerback position. So Tim Walton is a beast, man. I'm loving what he's doing on the trail. Tim Walton is bringing in Aaron Scott, bringing in Bryce West, and let me see here. Let me pull this up real quick. So Aaron Scott, Bryce West, and Miles Lockhart is a great haul. I'm loving that. Miles Lockhart is a kid from Arizona who he's like a kind of a lower 4-star kid, but I love, he's one of those guys who's like a hitter, and he's being told by the coaching staff that he's coming in to play that slot role. I think that's a great get for Ohio State, kind of a diamond in the rough type guy. And then you look at the top 2 corners Ohio State's bringing in. You have Aaron Scott, who is a composite 5-star. I love that, man. Kids from Ohio, but it was not an easy recruitment for Ohio State. They actually had to go out and win that one. I expect that kid to be a superstar. him and Jermaine Matthews and Bryce West are kind of already talking on Twitter about how Ohio's bringing BIA back. I'm loving like the attitude and just the style players that they're bringing in at corner. And then you look at Bryce West. He's a guy who's only 5'11", 177, but crazy athlete. Probably one of the fastest players on the team right when he comes in. Another guy who's like a fringe 5-star corner, right? Just overall solid player out of Glenville. And everyone says, man, bringing those kids in from Glenville is just so important, right? That connection, I think, and I think Ryan Day's finally realizing this. I think that that Glenville to Ohio State pipeline is something that just simply has to be kept open. If you're the coach at Ohio State, you might as well just take the time right now and go ahead and get to know Ted Ginn Sr. and establish that pipeline right away. So if he brings in any kids at Glenville that are D1 Ohio State level players, he's like, look, this is where you're going. He's sending them there as long as they're cool with it, obviously. But I mean, I think this cornerback unit is elite. I think that it's not just good. I think it's elite. And you look at adding this unit, the Aaron Scott, Bryce West, and Miles Lockhart into a unit that already has Jermaine Matthews, Calvin Simpson Hunt. I know I'm going to forget somebody. Oh, yeah, Davison Igbinosun. I mean, BIA is back. And the only thing that could potentially stop BIA from being back is the safety position, which we can talk about that now. Ohio State's safety position, they're bringing in, obviously we talked about Garrett Stover, but he's going to be in the linebacker room. And then they're bringing in two guys who are honestly, they're 3-star guys. Looking at Jalen McClain and Leroy Roker. Honestly, I'm surprised that Leroy Roker did not get a significant bump. If you go look at his huddle film from this past year, that kid is a beast, man. And he's one of those guys who's playing both sides of the ball too, which typically when you're looking at like your high 4-star, your 5-star players, those guys are playing both sides of the ball and looking dominant on both sides. You're not just going to see a safety who only plays defense and is not out there making plays on offense also. Because if you have a kid that's that talented, you're going to put him out on the field, right? Especially in high school. Leroy Roker is one of those guys. He, on the field, he looks like the best athlete, and he's out there making plays. Honestly, kind of like a ball hawk type player. I'm excited for these kids just because you never know what players are going to turn out to be. Look at Denzel Burke. He was a fringe 3-star player when Ohio State brought him in, and he is potentially going to end up being a first-round pick when he leaves here, even if he leaves this year. So I don't know. This unit overall, I'm going to grade it out as like a D, I think, because they didn't really get any. They kind of missed on all the big targets that they went after. I need to see better from Perry Eliano in terms of recruiting, because that could be the one thing that holds this Ohio State best in America unit from playing to that potential. Because I think that with the cornerback position, Tim Walton's kind of got it locked down, and we kind of know what we're getting from here on out. But the safety position still has some questions to answer. Hopefully, Perry Eliano, will get that fixed. All right, so that was it for the position grades. I think overall this class is elite. I think that Ohio State has a lot of potential here. They have a really good top end of guys that are just coming in and you're expecting them. Like, these guys at some point should be starters at Ohio State. These guys should be kind of those nationally relevant names. They should be really good players. And then you have a bunch of guys kind of in the middle who could end up being that, or, who just really kind of need some development. So I don't know, man. I think that it was good how Ohio State was able to hold this class together late in terms of not letting any of these guys go, other than Jeremiah McClellan. And that one was kind of the one that if you were okay with anybody going, I guess it would be him because of the unit that it's coming from. I don't know. I know there's still a couple guys. Like, this is not the end-all, be-all of the class. There's a couple guys that Ohio State are still going after. I'll kind of get more information about that and bring it to you guys on the next show. But they are still going after a couple defensive linemen, which I think would be huge. I think one of them, I do want to talk about now is Dominic McKinley. He's a 5-star defensive lineman that Larry Johnson really wanted to get. Ohio State really wanted to get, but I think he was wanting to stay closer to home, closer to down south. I don't know. I'm hearing that Ohio State wants to try to spin the block with him again, but I don't know. If the kid wants to stay there or stay south, he's probably going to. But we'll see how it works out, man. If they can get a couple late adds at the defensive line class, I think overall this class could end up being like an A-plus class. If they don't, you know what? I'm not going to say A-plus because there are a few positions that are lacking. Overall, this class could probably end up being like a A- class if they can add 1 or 2 more defensive linemen to it. And because I don't see them adding at any of the other positions where they're kind of lacking at right now. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up for today, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, hit the like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Come back for more content daily. But thanks for watching, guys. Peace out, and you have a great day.